it's said that 20 people per week die in Calais and Dunkirk trying to jump onto lorries or the Channel Tunnel train. So 20 people each week die from accidents, and you know, it all goes unreported. We can't get journalists out there to actually write the story, you know, as they find it. It's all driven by stereotype, by, you know, oh, they're all people traffickers, aren't they? So we don't want to know about that. The Daily Mail has already covered that. They're really reluctant to actually come and show the situation. There's some other points that I wanted to make. A lot of the comments that you find in newspapers when there's something about the refugee crisis, people will say, oh, they'll all come here and they want benefits and they'll steal our jobs and this kind of thing. Actually, over the last 50 years of migration, refugees and economic migrants have been the smallest group of benefit claimants of all, and the largest proportion of the population who set up small to medium-sized enterprises, and SMEs are the driving factor behind economic growth. They account for something like 70% of all economic growth. So they're very hard-working, inventive people who want nothing better than to just stand on their own 2 feet. So should you bump into those kinds of prejudices, you know, please arm yourselves with facts. Like, we are talking about less than 0.5% of the European population. We are talking about people who want to go home, preferably. We are talking about people who want to work. We're talking about people who are educated, etc., etc. The myths are many, and please help to dispel them.
Yeah, when we were setting up this clinic for unregistered refugees in Turkey, we employed, as I explained, the Syrian population. And I remember one very, very highly qualified consultant, internal medicine consultant, who just said, I can't see how I'll ever be able to go back to my country. And he was devastated. Of course he wanted to go back. He wanted to stay in Syria, but they're forced to flee. They can't live because it's just too dangerous. And another point, when you were saying just now about something you sparked off my thought about they're not just economic migrants. Another prejudice that people have now, unfortunately, is the jihadis. People are worried. And there was somebody who was receiving people coming into the little island of Leros, where people are now arriving in Greece. Sorry?
What's her name?
I don't know her name. This is someone who lives there. Said they do not come with guns. They're like anybody else. Most people are real refugees. They are hunted people who didn't want to leave their homes, who lost families and friends in that war. We can't start treating the refugees as criminals because of the jihadis. That just struck me that it's just, you know, it's another prejudice that we are having to face all the time.
If someone says, why don't they go to a country near them? They have. Lebanon has 1/4 of its population is now made up of Syrian refugees. 1/4 of its population. Now, if the UK says we're full, we're not. Lebanon physically cannot support any more refugees. It's just not possible. We can.
Yeah. Out of the 12 million, which is half the population of Syria is displaced, which is 12 million. And out of that 12 million, 4 million are in the surrounding countries, Lebanon, Jordan and Turkey. So they are hugely doing their bit. And we have become Fortress Britain, I think.
Can I just say something? Instead of encouraging migrants to come into this country, Cameron and his lot are trying to chuck more people out of this country. The immigration bill going through Parliament at the moment is aimed at making a very lot of people destitute, and also of sending people back without allowing them to have their appeals. So I think it's important that people, that bill, I'm not entirely sure what stage it's in. I believe it's already gone through its 3rd reading. It should have a reading at the House of Lords sometime, so it's probably still not too late to protest about it, but we need to defend asylum seekers in this country at the same time as challenging those arguments and I agree totally. And my response from the media has been as negative as yours has, in trying to say that we've got this space for people in this country.
And you're absolutely right, in not allowing them their right to appeal. Actually, the UK government is contravening international humanitarian law. by law, you have a right to appeal deportation under asylum rules.
But
and
they're already
trying to
carrying
take
that
away.
out to some extent, so it's useful to know that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Something to that, please. The fact that Sweden, for example, has said that they will welcome any refugee who's from Syria as a legitimate asylum seeker, it means that lots of refugees who aren't Syrian actually throw away their papers, passports, and claim to be Syrian. Even in the camps in France, when I was accompanied by a young Kurd who came to the camp at Calais with me, I said to some people, "Where are you from?" They all went, "Syria, Syria." And the Kurd next to me said, "They're not, they're speaking Kurdish, they're from somewhere else." So it's a very noticeable thing, this, you know, whether that's abuse of the system or whether that's desperation. We're not there to play God and decide who's who and who deserves help and who doesn't. But it is, you know, very much something that's dictated by politics, this problem.
Research in this country over issues where asylum seekers have been oppressed, that they have shown that there has been some degree of competition between asylum seekers as to who's deserving and who's not deserving. And as you say, it's such an extreme situation of desperation. I would suggest it was more that than people falling personally. Because why would you travel all those miles, live in those shit conditions, if you were going to fall, you know? They're not going to get into this country.
Yep.
I wanted to ask a question about whether in the camps, whether people, like, how is the response on the refugee side in this period of wait? Like, do people, I don't know, set up some form of solidarity groups? Do some people set up some form of, like, you know, whilst people wait and whilst people, like, is there any form of people trying to...
They find it difficult to set up a true sense of community, and it varies from camp to camp. In the Calais camp, because it's more established and because, as I said, some of the refugees there have been there for several years, you'll get, the camp itself is arranged into about 6 or 7 sections, generally by area. So there's the Sudanese part of the camp where most of the Sudanese refugees will be. There's Afghanistan part of the camp, there's this very small Eritrean part. There are, you know, they will generally find their own culture and stick together. And, you know, there was one evening there where we ended up being sat around in the more established part of the camp, a campfire, and we'd given them a guitar and we started teaching a couple of the refugees to play guitar. Over the other side of the Calais camp, there is a restaurant, bar, which has been set up, which is used as the base for prostitution in the camp. And in the newer outlying areas, it becomes much more a focus of just surviving. And they are so consumed at the moment in just trying to get what's needed to make it through the night. Tents, if they get one, they're lucky they have a tent. With the weather conditions the way they are at the moment, tents are getting ruined on a nightly basis. You know, you'll turn up to the camp and in the skip are broken tents. And that's, oh great, we've got to get more tents out. The good news from the point of view of Dunkirk camp, until recently, no non-permanent structures of any type were allowed. So tents were all that people could have. But we finally heard that there has been permission given to begin a building programme to build non-permanent structures, wooden structures that are at least insulated, get people off the ground. And the hope for Dunkirk is that once that's done, a little bit of a community can start to form. You don't have time to have a community until you don't have to worry about survival. So there is a sense of community and solidarity, and actually both camps in the wake of the Paris attacks held solidarity marches. They actually got together and showed their solidarity for Paris. You know, there is a sense of community, but with people from such a diverse set of backgrounds and struggling to survive, certainly in my experience, you don't get that vibe yet. I'm hoping they're not going to be there long enough to establish that vibe either, but unfortunately I suspect that's not going to be the case.
Is there electricity in the house?
There is one power socket in Dunkirk, and in Calais, there's very limited electricity. They do have generators that are provided by some of the volunteers, and if they can get diesel for them, then they can generate electricity for there. Calais, being older, is leaps apart from Dunkirk, so it does actually have shacks have been set up as little businesses and things like that, and there are communal cooking areas. But at night it's pitch black, and actually providing light and darkness is one of our key aims, because A, for safety, and B, in the last 3 weeks there have been 4 separate fires in the Calais camp of tents burning down because candles are being used and they have no way of seeing anything. So one of our big priorities is trying to get wind-up torches out there so that we can cut down on the use of candles in the camps. I don't know what it's like in Greece. I mean, obviously it's a less static.
I don't really know, because I haven't personally had personal experience in Greece, so I can't really comment any more than any of you about Greece. But certainly thinking back, that picture I showed you of the camp in Tunisia, where the sub-Saharan Africans have been put who couldn't be repatriated during after the Libyan war. What you were saying about candles, that they had lots of fires in that camp.
Yeah.
It was really scary.
Fires and nylon tents on top of one another. It is a recipe for disaster. There's not yet been a death due to fire in Calais. There have been many injuries, but it is only a matter of time.